Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are really getting into the weeds on the Berlin Wall, but maybe not in the way you usually think about it. We're looking at it as this epicenter of a technical battle.
Yeah, a real high-stakes arms race, you could say, between, state control and just incredible human ingenuity, people trying to get free.
Exactly. So we're diving into an era that's really defined by that clash. Absolute control versus this relentless creativity.
And the sources we're using for this deep dive, they really go beyond just the dates and the politics. We're focusing on the mechanics of defiance, how people actually did it.
Right, the engineering, the planning.
The psychology, too, the cost. And this constant back and forth, this sort of technical arms race between East German security and ordinary citizens.
Okay, let's set the scene then. Why build this thing in the first place? We're talking August 1961.
Well, the GDR, East Germany, was facing a crisis, a really existential one. Humiliation, but also, the economy was basically bankrupt.
And people were leaving in droves, weren't they?
A flood. It was a massive demographic drain. I mean, think about it. Between 1945 and 61, something like 20% of the entire population left.
Wow, 20%.
Yeah, 3.5 million people. And it wasn't just anyone. It was doctors, engineers, students, the skilled workforce, the future, basically.
So it wasn't just about money, though. The economic difference was huge. It was deeper.
Oh, absolutely. It was the lack of freedom, real personal autonomy, the feeling of being trapped, unable to choose your own path, speak freely.
The simple ability to travel.
That's it. Rises Freiheit. Freedom to travel, freedom to choose. That was the core desire.
So the wall, starting as this kind of ramshackle fence.
Yeah, thrown up quickly.
It became this fortress, a declaration, really.
A physical statement that the state owned its citizens. They couldn't or wouldn't fix the real problems, so they built a cage instead. A 157-kilometer cage.
So that sets up the conflict. On one side, this huge state machine designed for control, designed to be lethal.
And on the other side, you have these two groups driven by desperation and hope. The Flüchtling, the escapees themselves.
And the Fluchthelfer, the escape helpers. Often organized, sometimes quite professional.
Right, and what they were up against. The physical structure itself was designed to kill. It wasn't just a wall.
You mean the Death Strip, the Todstreifen?
Exactly. That zone between the inner and outer walls. Crucially, it was entirely on East German soil.
Describe that for us. It sounds chilling.
It was meticulously designed for maximum visibility and lethality. Wide stretch of sand or gravel, raked smooth to show footprints. Floodlights, guard towers with overlapping fields of fire, anti-vehicle trenches, attack dogs.
And layers of fencing.
Multiple layers. Tripwires, sometimes mines. But the most terrifying part was the official order. The Schießbefehl.
The order to shoot.
Yes, a standing order. Guards weren't just allowed to shoot estate bees, they were expected to. Lethal force was the default.
So crossing wasn't just risky. The state was explicitly saying, attempt escape, and the penalty is death. It was a political statement made with bullets.
Precisely. And the agency tasked with enforcing this, the organization whose whole purpose really became tied to the wall, was the Stasi.
The Ministry for State Security, headed by Erich Mielke.
Yeah, and our sources suggest the wall gave the Stasi its existential purpose, its lifeblood.
How so? Structurally?
Well, think about it. If the problem is citizens escaping, the solution is total surveillance and prevention. The wall became the ultimate justification for the Stasi's massive size, its budget, its pervasive reach into society.
It employed, nearly 100,000 official staff?
And hundreds of thousands more unofficial informants. The wall kept them busy, kept them relevant, kept the funding flowing.
And their job wasn't just passive guarding. It was active counterintelligence against escape attempts.
Making the wall insurmountable, that was the goal. They were constantly developing countertactics, anticipating the next move.
Like what, specifically?
Well, when tunnels became common, they started investing heavily in counter-tunneling. They dug their own interception tunnels, sometimes trying to flood suspected areas.
And listening devices.
Sophisticated underground listening stations, geophones, designed to pick up the tiniest vibrations from digging, sometimes meters below the surface.
So it's this feedback loop. The wall creates the need for the Stasi. The Stasi works relentlessly to make the wall impenetrable.
Even using checkpoints not just for control, but for intelligence gathering, trying to recruit informants from Western visitors or returning East Germans. It was this whole ecosystem of control.
An ecosystem that very quickly showed its human cost. Which brings us to a really horrific event, the Peter Fechter tragedy.
August 17th, 1962. Just over a year after the wall went up. Peter Fechter, only 18, a construction worker. He and a friend, 𝐃𝐿, made a run for it near Checkpoint Charlie.
On broad daylight.
Yes, 𝐃𝐿 somehow miraculously made it over. It scrambled over the last wall, injured, but into the west.
But Fechter?
Fechter was hit multiple times. Just as he reached the final wall, he fell back into the death strip, fatally wounded, but not dead.
And this is the truly horrifying part. What happened next?
He was left there, lying in the open, bleeding, crying out for help. Our sources say for nearly an hour.
An hour. Why didn't anyone help?
On the western side, crowds gathered. U.S. soldiers were there, West Berlin police. But they were paralyzed. The Schießbefehl was clear. Entering the death strip meant potentially being shot themselves by the East German guards.
And the East German guards?
They just watched, following orders. Eventually, they carried his body away.
It was a spectacle. A deliberate one, it seems.
Absolutely. The cruelty, the public agony, the powerlessness of the West, that was the message. A deterrent. Don't even think about trying this.
The outrage in the West must have been immense.
Huge protests, massive anger. The first memorial that went up was just a simple cross. It said, "Wir klagen and we accuse."
A stark message. And Fechter wasn't the last.
No. By the first anniversary of the wall, there were already 20 confirmed deaths. Eventually, the official count reached at least 136, though the real number might be higher.
So this event, Fechter's death, it really cemented something, didn't it?
It proved that just making a desperate dash was basically suicide. If you wanted to escape, you needed a plan. You needed organization. Hope needed engineering.
Which logically leads us to the next phase, going underground, the tunnels.
Right. The lethal reality of the death strip forced this shift from, spontaneous attempts to complex, carefully planned operations, often led by surprising groups.
Like students.
Highly educated students, often. Medical students, philosophy students, engineers like Hasso Herschel and Wolfgang Fuchs became key figures. They applied their academic skills to a very practical, very dangerous problem.
And the most famous example, maybe the pinnacle of this effort, is Tunnel 57, October 1964.
An incredible feat of civilian engineering. Building a tunnel 140 meters long, right under the death strip, under the noses of the Stasi.
And the logistics.
Yeah.
Just imagine. First, the size. How big was it?
Deliberately tiny, only about 80 centimeters high and 80 wide. Maybe 3 feet by 3 feet.
Why so small? Just to dig faster.
Primarily to minimize the amount of dirt they had to remove and hide. That was the biggest giveaway.
Right, 140 meters long.
Yeah.
That's a lot of earth. How much are we talking?
Estimates are around 120 metric tons. Think about hiding that much soil in West Berlin without anyone noticing.
So how did they manage it?
Meticulously. They started in the basement of a former bakery on the west side. They filled up old coal bunkers, built false walls. Then, crucially, they bagged the dirt and had helpers distribute small amounts into garbage bins all across the district, night after night, blending it in.
Wow. And the digging itself. Brutal work, I imagine.
Incredibly tough. They worked around the clock, 247 in 12-hour shifts, often lying flat on their backs or stomachs, just scraping away with small spades, maybe 10 centimeters at a time.
In that tiny space, the air must have been terrible.
Damp, stale, low oxygen. They had a basic ventilation system, but it was still punishing. They used little trolleys on ropes to haul the dirt back.
What was the biggest fear down there? Collapse.
That was a risk, sure. But the primary fear, the one that really got to people, was detection. Specifically by the Stasi's geophones.
Those underground listening devices.
Exactly. They knew the Stasi was actively listening for any sound of digging, any vibration.
So how did they deal with that? Dig silently.
They tried. They developed techniques like only digging during periods of loud surface noise, heavy traffic, maybe a train passing overhead to mask their own sounds. They experimented with different tools.
But the fear was constant.
One digger described it as the ceaseless, terrifying sound of silence. Because when it was quiet up above, you knew they might be listening right then. Any tiny scrape could give you away.
This level of planning, the round-the-clock work, the materials, it sounds expensive. How did they fund it? This wasn't just volunteers with shovels anymore.
No, it had become professionalized in a way. It required serious money for food, tools, wood for shoring up the tunnel, lighting, ventilation, and importantly, it allowed the key organizers like Herschel and Fix to work on it full time.
So where did the money come from?
This is where it gets interesting. They essentially sold the media rights. They made deals with major German and international news agencies, granting them exclusive rights to film and photograph the tunnel, and especially the escape itself.
Like a movie deal, almost.
Not like a movie deal, almost.
In a way. And the biggest single chunk of funding, reportedly around 30,000 Deutschmarks, actually came from the West German government. Specifically, the Federal Ministry of Inter-German Relations.
So state-sponsored escape attempts, essentially.
You could see it that way. It allowed these Fluchthelfer groups to operate on a much larger, more sustainable scale.
And Tunnel 57 was the proof of concept. Did it work?
Spectacularly. Over 2 nights in October 64, 57 men, women, and children crawled through that tiny tunnel to freedom in West Berlin.
57 people. That's incredible.
It showed that even against the Stasi's technology and vigilance, organized, well-funded ingenuity could succeed. But of course, the Stasi learned from it, too. Right. So as tunnel detection got better, people had to find other ways. Which brings us to the surface again. But this time with speed and deception. The car arms race.
Exactly. If you couldn't go under, maybe you could go through very fast, exploiting that split-second window at the checkpoints before guards could react.
And this became a very visible back and forth, didn't it? Modify a car, the state modifies the barrier.
Immediately. The early attempts were sometimes brutally simple, like the lowrider roulette.
Tell us about that.
There's a famous case of a guy named Heinz. He had a convertible. He took the windshield off entirely. Then, crucially, he let most of the air out of the tires.
To lower the car.
Exactly. Yeah. Lowered it by just enough vital inches. He hid his fiancée and her mother inside, floored it towards the checkpoint barrier.
And went under the boom.
Right under it, before the guards could even properly raise their weapons. Sheer audacity.
Brilliant. But you can see the flaw.
Immediately obvious. The GDR reacted instantly. They added heavy steel bars, sometimes jagged spikes, hanging down below the main boom arm on all checkpoints.
So the next lowrider attempt wouldn't just be stopped.
It would be lethal. Likely decapitation. The state adapted ruthlessly.
Horrifying.
Yeah.
Okay, so height clearance was out. The focus shifted to pure concealment, hiding people inside the vehicle.
Yes, and this required incredible engineering precision. Which brings us to maybe the most iconic example, the BMW Isetta.
The bubble car. It's tiny. How could you possibly hide someone in that?
It seems impossible, right? 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏 wanted to smuggle his best friend out. The Isetta was all he had. It's basically an engine, 2 seats, and a door.
So what did he do?
He had to gut it. He took out the storage box, the spare tire. He even removed the main passenger seat assembly. Then the real work began.
Creating a hidden compartment.
Exactly. He cut a small opening, maybe 20 by 20 inches, into the panel behind where the seat used to be, near the engine. That was the entry point.
But the engine's right there. The heat, the fumes.
That was the biggest danger. The passenger had to curl up in that tiny space with their legs practically touching the engine and exhaust. 𝐃𝐄𝐏 actually had to physically bend the exhaust pipe to make just enough room.
And the risk of burns.
Huge. He fabricated a special heat shield, a new floor panel out of sheet metal to try and protect the hidden passenger from the scorching exhaust.
Just imagine being that passenger. Cramped in total darkness, the engine roaring inches away, smelling exhaust fumes, probably sweating buckets.
Well, Stasi guards are right outside, tapping on the car, checking papers. The claustrophobia, the terror, it must have been unbearable. Any sound, any movement could give you away.
Yet it worked.
It did. His friend made it across. And this method, modifying cars, not just Isettas, but others with false floors, hidden compartments and fuel tanks, people even strapped underneath vehicles, it's estimated maybe 1,000 people escaped this way.
1,000? That's significant.
Very significant, but also very high risk. Many people were caught trying this, both escapees and the helpers who modified the cars or drove them. Arrests were common.
So by the 1970s, tunnels are harder, cars are riskier, checkpoints are tighter. The Stasi is adapting constantly. Where does the ingenuity go next?
Up. Above the wire.
The Great Balloon Flight. This one always sounds like something out of a movie.
It really does. 2 families, the Strelziks and the Wetzels. Faced with the heavily fortified border, they came up with this, well, frankly, audacious plan to fly over it in a homemade hot air balloon.
And these weren't engineers or pilots?
Not at all. Günter Betzel was a bricklayer. Peter Strelzik was an electrician, I think. They had 0 background in aeronautics. Their initial designs were based literally on looking at pictures of balloons in magazines.
How did they even figure out how big it needed to be?
Rough calculations. They estimated they needed about 1,800 cubic meters of volume in the balloon envelope to lift the 8 people, the 2 couples and their 4 children, plus the gondola and fuel.
Okay, 1,800 cubic meters.
Yeah.
That means a lot of fabric. How do you buy that much material in East Germany without raising suspicion?
That was one of the biggest hurdles. They couldn't just order it. They had to buy small amounts of suitable fabric things like light taffeta, nylon from different stores over a long period. Little bits here and there trying to look like normal shoppers. About 900 square meters in total.
900 square meters. And then sewing it together.
𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏 apparently did most of the sewing. On an old, manually operated sewing machine, working secretly for weeks, stitching together this enormous bag, 15 meters wide and 20 meters tall. The sheer bulk of it must have been a nightmare to handle and hide.
And the heat source. How did they build a burner powerful enough?
Strelzyk handled that. He built a gondola out of a basic iron frame and some sheet metal. For the burner, the engine, he ingeniously rigged up 2 standard 11-kilogram propane gas bottles like you'd use for a camping stove, feeding into some stove piping. It was pure DIY thermodynamics.
Incredible. They had a failure first, right? In 1978?
Yes, their first attempt didn't make it. They launched, but the balloon got damp, too heavy, and they had to land just short of the border. It caused a lot of tension, a rift between the families for a while. The Stasi found the abandoned balloon, which increased the pressure massively.
But they didn't give up. They tried again. September 16th, 1979. What were they waiting for?
The perfect weather. Absolutely critical. They needed clear skies, stable conditions, and crucially, a steady wind blowing from the north. Strong enough to carry them over the border zone, but not so strong it was dangerous.
And they found it.
Yes. They launched in the middle of the night around 2 a.m. from a field near Oberlemnitz.
What must that flight have been like? 25 minutes in the dark.
Terrifying, I'd imagine. Silent, apart from the roar of the burners whenever they fired them up. Floating high above the searchlights, the guard towers, the dogs. Completely at the mercy of the wind. They had some control over altitude by heating the air, but very little over direction.
And they made it.
They did. The propane started running low. They began descending, unsure exactly where they were. They landed fairly hard in a field near the town of Naila in West Germany. They were free.
An unbelievable story. The news must have gone everywhere. How did the GDR react to people literally floating over their impenetrable wall?
It was a huge embarrassment, obviously, and it forced an immediate reaction. They tightened border security significantly in that whole southern region.
Practical measures.
Yes. They closed small airfields near the border. They ordered any remaining private planes to be moved further inland. And you can bet the Stasi ramped up surveillance, maybe more radar, looking for slow-moving aerial targets. Every successful escape forced the state to escalate its defenses.
So we've seen these incredible feats. Tunnels, cars, balloons, breaking through the physical barrier.
Yeah.
But that brings us to the epilogue, doesn't it? The wall wasn't just concrete and wire. There was the psychological aspect, the wall in the mind.
Exactly. And this is maybe the Stasi's most lasting and most sinister legacy. Their real goal wasn't just stopping escapes. It was atomizing society, creating such pervasive fear and suspicion that people couldn't trust each other enough to organize or resist.
And the Fluchthelfer, the helpers, if they were caught, the consequences were severe.
Brutal. Long prison sentences, often years in harsh conditions. Up to 3.5 years wasn't uncommon, but it went beyond that. Their families were often punished too publicly shamed, labeled criminals, denied jobs or education opportunities. It sent a message. Helping others is dangerous. Community solidarity is suspect.
And the suspicion was deliberately cultivated throughout society, wasn't it? Through the informant network.
The inoffizielle Mitarbeiter, the IMs. Hundreds of thousands of ordinary citizens coerced or persuaded into spying on their friends, neighbors, colleagues, even family members.
That must have created a terrible atmosphere.
A profound social trauma. You simply couldn't know who might be reporting on you. That constant low-level anxiety, that lack of trust, it permeated everything.
And strikingly, research after reunification shows this damage lasted, didn't it? It's measurable.
It is. Studies have found that areas in the former GDR that had a higher density of Stasi informants, more spies per person, still show lower levels of social trust today.
Lower trust in neighbors.
Lower interpersonal trust, yes. And lower trust in institutions as well. Decades later, the shadow remains.
That's incredible. And there were economic consequences linked to this surveillance density, too.
Yes. The data suggests a correlation. Areas with more intense Stasi surveillance tended to have worse economic outcomes, later lower income, higher unemployment.
Why would that be?
Well, think about who the Stasi targeted most intensely. Not just overt dissidents, but anyone showing initiative, independence, leadership potential, entrepreneurs, creative thinkers, community organizers. By suppressing these very people in high surveillance areas, they essentially hobbled the region's potential for innovation and collective action.
So the physical wall came down, but this internal wall of suspicion, the one the Stasi built, that proved much harder to dismantle.
Far more resilient, as one source puts it. In a dark way, the Stasi achieved a core objective. They fostered a climate where simple trust was difficult, making collective resistance harder.
That's the chilling part. The ingenuity of the escapees overcame the concrete, the wire, the guards. But the psychological warfare left deeper scars.
Yeah, it's a really sobering thought about the long-term effects of surveillance states.
And the final irony, the almost absurd ending to this whole decades-long struggle. The wall didn't fall because of some grand escape plan.
No, it was ultimately a bureaucratic blunder, a moment of confusion.
November 9th, 1989, the press conference announcement about travel regulations.
Which was misinterpreted, or at least communicated badly, leading to massive crowds gathering at the checkpoints.
And it was a Stasi officer, wasn't it?
Lieutenant Colonel Harold Jaeger at the Bornholmer Strasse checkpoint, facing this huge, expectant crowd, unsure of his orders, apparently getting no clear guidance from superiors. He made the decision himself.
To open the barrier.
To open the gate. And that was it. The wall was breached not by force, but by confusion within the very apparatus designed to maintain it forever.
The system collapsed under the weight of its own rigidity, in a way.
A perfect, almost blackly comic ending. The ingenuity of the escape helpers showed human will could beat the physical barriers. But the state machinery, in the end, kind of tripped over its own feet. Yet the psychological legacy, as we discussed, lingered.
So wrapping this up, what an incredible journey. From the terror of Peter Fechter's death to the sheer engineering brilliance of Tunnel 57, the nerve required for the Isetta escapes, the breathtaking audacity of the balloon flight.
These stories are just powerful examples of what happens, what creativity flourishes when basic freedoms are denied. It wasn't just about running. It was about outthinking, out-engineering a massive state apparatus.
They professionalized hope, as you said earlier.
They really did, using engineering, finance, logistics, all in the service of freedom.
So for you listening today, what's the takeaway? The physical wall fell suddenly. But those internal walls, the distrust sown by the Stasi, they lasted much longer.
Yeah, and it makes you think, doesn't it, about today, about the subtle ways surveillance, maybe corporate, maybe state, maybe just the kind of social pressure online affects how we trust each other, how communities function.
Are there modern structures, maybe ones we don't even see as clearly as concrete and barbed wire, that are building similar internal walls, walls of suspicion or division that are maybe even harder to breach?
That's the provocative question, I think. What are the invisible walls we face now, and what kind of ingenuity will it take to overcome them?
A really important thought to leave with. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.